It has been a very difficult thing for us as a family to pick up the pieces and keep moving. But it is what my husband wanted and expected from us. I don't know that I'll ever match the courage that he has had, but I'm going to go down trying. I wrote out my speech because there's so much going on that, and I have to make sure that I tell it correctly for multiple different reasons. And so I hope you don't mind that once in a while I'm reading what I have here. And I start off by talking about why I've come here today, and that is to talk about my husband Robert LaVoy Finicum and what transpired between the BLM and me since his murder. And I'm talking just a little bit about what I've been putting up with the BLM, as well as the investigation of my husband's murder. As most of you know, LaVoy traveled to Oregon on the 1st of January 2016. And he went up there to attend a peaceful demonstration march that the Hammond family had set up. I have to take that back. That they had set up for the Hammond family to demonstrate and support them. Mr. Hammond and his son had been incarcerated, found guilty of arson, and under the terrorist laws, they had been convicted and sentenced to jail. Mr. Hammond had only been sentenced for 3 months, and his son for a year, and they went and they served their time. And what happened was, the BLM and the government didn't like that the mandatory sentences were not required and sentenced by the judge. The judge took it upon himself to lessen the mandatory sentence guidelines. And so when they returned home, there had been a change in judges and administration. And so the government went back in and tried them, back into a court of law and insisted upon the 5-year mandatory sentences to be served by both men. And so the new judge ordered them back to prison. So technically it wasn't double jeopardy, but they had served the time the first judge had given them and returned home, and then sentenced back to serve out the remaining 5 years.
And so, just so we understand, that was they were setting backfires on the land, right?
The reason why yes. There were multiple, they started collecting information on the Hammond family clear back in the 90s, trying to take this land away from them, their property. Not because they had a great resource in water, they had a lot of water, and they had a lot of land. And so the government had been eyeing this particular ranch for quite some time, and they had already eliminated a lot of the ranchers in that area.
Right.
And so, with that said, they had this dossier on them that was quite thick. But the only 2 counts that they could hold against them from all the fires was 2 that they had actually set themselves. All of the lightning strike fires they had put in this family's file, trying to hold them accountable for all of the
natural fires,
lightning strikes. But there was this 2 particular fires that they had, backfires that they had started to stop the spread of the fires coming down to their own property or burning down their own home. In one of those, there was 100 acres of BLM land that was burned. In the second fire, 1 acre had burned. But the fire that he started, it was an actual lightning strike, and it went for quite a few thousands of acres before it got to Mr. Hammond's, but he had the foresight to light a fire to start to kill the fuel. But then when the fire merged into the both together, it burned 1 acre of BLM, and that's what they were able to convict them on, was the 1 acre incident and the 100 acre incident.
That's the same thing firefighters do.
Exactly.
It's a normal procedure that
Firefighters
people do.
Being arrested for this. Why was he arrested?
Okay, but Because they want to steal his land.
Because they put, under the Terrorist Act, they were able to prosecute them under that federal statute because it was federal ground. So they're in prison for something that they shouldn't be in prison for.
And the judge didn't give them the mandatory
Because
minimum,
he felt it was
cruel and unusual,
right.
to do that.
So that sets you up to why the Hammond Bundy was there, and then why my husband went up on the first, the demonstration. My husband felt that it was completely unacceptable for this to be happening to a 74-year-old man who my husband likened unto his own father, and a son going to prison for trying to save their own property. And so he was unaware. You know, he packed his backpack, his overnight kit, and off he went. And so the next day when they drove all night to get there, so the next day when they were approached by Ammon about his idea to go to Malheur and continue the peaceful demonstration there, 35 miles out of town, he said yes, and he went with them. And so that was the first my husband had heard about it. And of course, you know, when he's making the phone calls to home, I'm going, what? You're doing what? And of course it was on the evening news. You know, you're listening to all of everybody else's rhetoric and what's going on, and you have a great deal of fear for your family and concern that, you know, they're never going to make it back. And I can remember when he rode that day with the Bundys on a horse. And I can remember my friends out there, and I'm at home with the foster kids, and I can't leave, and I can't take them there. That would be irresponsible of me. And so I'm waiting to hear any word back, and my friends are calling me by cell phone and texting me and keeping me abreast of everything that's going on until the FBI cuts all communication. And then no cell phone use is going out of the Bundy area. They had a no-fly zone. They completely blacked everything out, no media, nothing. If Dennis Michael Lynch hadn't been on the ground there, we would not have his footage. If Pete Santilli hadn't been up there, we wouldn't have his footage and his story. He was one of the only brave press to continue on throughout the whole thing. And it's amazing that even our press is in jail over this. We do not have a free press. We do not have the free exercise, First Amendment right to free speech, or Second Amendment to carry while we're peacefully demonstrating. We are losing all of our rights. And we do need to stand. And I know you guys, I'm talking to the choir here. I know I'm talking to like-minded individuals. There are some that I hold personally responsible for the outcome of my husband's murder, and I'm just going to read to you. Sheriff Dave Ward, for relinquishing his authority to the FBI instead of allowing them some time to exercise their First Amendment right to free speech and peacefully demonstrate, as others throughout this country have been allowed to do. Judge Grassi, for refusing to hear or to take into consideration the redress for grievances Ammon filed months beforehand. Governor Kate Brown, for her letter dated January 20th, 2016, to Attorney General Loretta Lynch and FBI Director James Comey 6 days before they murdered my husband, which says, and I quote, "I must insist on a swift resolution to this matter. I request that you instruct your agencies to end the unlawful occupation of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge as quickly as possible," naming them as, quote, radicals and criminals, claiming they are harassing law enforcement and their family members, and I say all of which was untrue. That was completely false. Senator Wyden, who said to KOIN 6 News, quote, "This should have ended a long time ago. This is a situation where the virus is spreading and we need to stop it. Action needs to be taken." To the FBI and the Oregon State Police, for escalating things within the town of Burns, inciting fear in the hearts and minds of its citizens, and by walking around town tacked out, armed to the hilt, and for murdering my husband. Those are the people who I hold responsible for the death of my husband, not the two individuals who actually pulled the trigger. Because I think so much happened before, during, and even after that is not being addressed. And they would like nothing more than an individual to take the whole blame for what everybody conspired to do. And I use that word purposely. Many times we have watched out of control protest. Baltimore mayor said, "Let it burn, give them their space to destroy." And those are direct quotes. In Ferguson, the governor said, "Give them 48 hours." And he would not offer his support until after 48 hours of rioting. In New York, Mayor de Blasio told the police to stand down and to give them some space to blow off steam. These are direct quotes in the media. Dakota Access Pipeline protests, months of protesting, destroying property, setting off a bomb on a bridge. All of these protests mentioned were not peaceful. They destroyed personal property, they harmed others, yet they were allowed to continue, some even for months. Maybe because they were politically correct. None of this behavior went on at Malheur. None of it. They were peaceful men, wanting their voices to be heard. And yes, Senator Wyden was right. Their message was spreading. People could resonate with the message of freedom, of liberty, of personal property rights, all of which are guaranteed in our Constitution, the law of this land. And people naturally, when heard and taught by them, Ammon and LaVoy and Ryan and the others up there, it resonated, it touched their heart because they knew it to be true when it was explained. Officials investigating the death of my husband referred to the killing as a routine traffic stop. That was the first headline that went out about the murder of my husband, that this was a routine traffic stop. However, the FBI video shows that this was not a typical traffic stop. It was a planned ambush involving a roadblock on a blind curve along a lonely stretch of highway, a dead man's blockade, a kill stop, all of which are illegal. Nothing routine about it. It was planned days in advance and executed by an elite kill team that was brought in just a couple of days before he was murdered. The FBI said Finicum was shot after reaching a gun, that the shooting which resulted in LaVoy's death was justified. This allegation and finding is in dispute. I dispute that. The FBI aerial video was of poor quality, edited, and provided no audio. Our family asserts that he was shot with both hands up and that he did not reach for a gun, but that he reacted in response to pain inflicted either by a rubber bullet or from being tased or from his arms just dropping because he was losing his balance in 3.5 feet of snow. And I can hardly believe that a team of qualified law officers could look at the facts in this case and say that no criminal laws were broke and that no authorities violated any laws. We have already found that the FBI has lied. They have removed evidence from the scene. And that is just one example that we have now. How could they have reached this decision in the face of evidence that clearly shows the intent to kill my husband? We have talked about with independent investigators that state that watching the video proves that there was a planned assassination. And many people, including my attorneys, have asked me to, accept what is. Well, I'm not going to accept it. And I don't think anything could prepare me to accept what is so clearly a finding that challenges the Constitution that my husband died defending. I know that under the Constitution, the men who shot my husband to death while he was surrendering are entitled to due process of law, but they are not entitled to walk free and not have to face the same legal process that is a barrier to you and me. They shot my husband, they left him laying in the snowbank, no medical assistance, no charges, no arraignment, no preliminary hearing, no indictment, and no trial by a jury. where he too would have been found innocent. He had no due process of law. We are overcome with gratitude, and we're very grateful that some of the defendants have been found not guilty. But my husband was denied his right to a fair trial for merely using his words to educate others about their constitutional rights. He was a threat to the authorities. His voice was a threat. His ability to be able to talk. He educated himself. He was a man of God, and people could feel that spirit within him when he spoke. He was powerful. He was strong. He was unafraid. He had conviction. And they knew that about him. Just the little bit he was out there, they knew that about my husband, and they knew that he would continue to stand at all odds. And just because you have that kind of integrity, that strength, that belief, doesn't mean you're automatically going to pick up a gun and go about it blazing. It means you're principled. The consolation I have at this point is that hundreds and thousands of Americans have seen the video and know the truth and believe as I do that my husband was murdered intentionally, deliberately, and with malice. Someday the truth will be known throughout this country. And I know that they've silenced one voice, but I say over and over again that they have created 13 more, because me and my 12 children will not be silent. Will not be silent. And as we travel around, we meet people like you. Your story and other stories are coming out, and we're hearing them and we're sharing them, and we have to be each other's support. We have to continue to tell the message, to educate, to let people know that this is happening, not just to the Bundys and the Hammonds and the Finicums, but it's happening to Joe Robertson and the Hages and the Dan sisters and all of these people suffering, one either in Texas, the guy with the river, the property on the river.
Red River.
Yep.
All over this country, little pieces like this are happening. And the media, there's a complete blackout to these stories because they do not want the good American people to hear what is happening to other good American citizens of this country. So we have to be our support for each other. We have to be our own news media. Since my husband's murder, I have had much to deal with on multiple forms, and working with the BLM has literally been a nightmare. They have delayed talking to me, delayed responding to me and my attorneys, delayed negotiations, refused to recognize me as the legal owner of my own dang property. In Arizona, when you die without a will, it's community property. It's a community property state, and whatever is left goes to the spouse, surviving spouse. Because my name wasn't on the permit, which is not the property, it's the permit to graze your cows. They have stated that that permit died when my husband died. It ended. In their own regulations, within their own regulations, and let me see, 4110.2-3E allows a 2-year period for the surviving heirs to work out any problems that that permit may have. Negotiations, fines, whatever the problems are. You can even apply for a new permit, have your application processed, continue ranching throughout all of this 2-year period. You can even apply for an extension after that 2-year period so that you may continue to operate your ranch
Well,
as normal. And they have refused to allow me access to my 7-month winter lease since LaVoy died. I was forced to, well, I had to take them off for summer. He was killed end of January, 1st of February. And with all that was going on, I didn't even start to think about cows until May. I didn't even think about them until May, and that's the time I needed to start pulling them off of my winter range, and I had nowhere to go because they had already taken our previous summer range. And so I had no idea what to do, and I was just, well, I'm just going to leave them where they're at because I don't know where to go with 80 head cows. And we're talking desert, not this nice lush green grass that you have here in Texas. And my first communications were threats and questions that they wanted answered from me. And I didn't have answers. I didn't know what I was going to do. And because I mentioned that I had an attorney, that was the last communication from my local BLM office. From that point on, they referred it to their federal solicitor, and I have had nothing but wait, wait, and wait. October 5th, I had to pull them off. I put them in, my in-laws gave me 5 acres. We had to fence it. I had to find water. I had to pipe it in there. I had to get feeders. I had to buy hay for 5 months to feed 80 head, and I don't know if you understand how much that is. That's a lot of hay. I had been, in the meantime, negotiating with the BLM, trying through my attorneys to get them to allow me back on. October 15th is the first day of my winter range. And I had filled out an application. They didn't like it. I filled it out again. They said, you owe $12,000 and something for fees that your husband accrued from when he had, before he was killed for trespass, because he put him on 2 weeks early. And I even wrote the check out so that I could just get on my range and to be done with it, thinking that was the last thing they were requiring of me. Application, money. They refused. Then they told me that the application wasn't processed. The environmentalist needed to do an impact study. Everything, there was one excuse after another, after another, after another, and here I am sitting out in the middle of the desert on my first day, a 14-mile push of a 50-mile trek with 80 head of cows with all their babies. And I'm stuck there and I have nowhere to go, again. So I tore up the check. And my sister-in-law, this is the ironic part, she contacted the BLM and asked if she could allow my cows on her range because she had a permit that allowed her over 200 head. And could I put my cows with her cows? And within less than 24 hours, I had permission to put my cows on her range in less than 24 hours. And to this day, I still do not, yes, they did know it was my cows. Absolutely, they know and exactly everything I'm doing and where. And to this day, I am still not on my range. It is summertime, it is wintertime pasture right now. Summer hits May 15th to October 15th, and I'm working to try to be back on my range by October 15th again. But again, I get no responses. Instead of following the clear federal regulation, the BLM instead obfuscates, refuses to acknowledge that I am my husband's wife and widow. They deny that I have any right to the permit and pretend that it is simply terminated upon his death. That is their continual response. We show them the federal regulations that authorize the transfer of rights of the permit to me, and instead they obfuscate and ignore. To this point, they've refused to even acknowledge my rights under a clear federal regulation, which I already quoted to you, 4110.2-3E, transferring of grazing preference regulation, and instead ignore me and continue their obfuscation, thus forcing my cattle off my land and forcing me to litigate for almost a year and a half now. It's almost been a year and a half. The local BLM people want me back on. This has nothing to do with the local people. It's the feds. They want to make an example out of me. They want to make sure that the Finicums don't ever ranch again. Anything connected to my husband, who was brave enough to stand up. And now I'm, going to go back just a little history. We began our ranch in 2008. We purchased cows and put them on the tuck-up range in the winter. I think we started off with like 20 head of cows. The allotment is 160 cows, 66 cows, and we started off with 20. And every year we would just add from our herd. We would just keep a few heifers here and there. And that's how we built our range and our ranch and our cows up to 80 head. I actually had 85 head, and the year that LaVoy, my husband, died, somebody came in and stole 12 of my mother head and their babies and a bull. So that was another thing I ended up going through, was theft. And what you need to understand, another thing that people don't understand, is that my ranch is 50 miles from my house. So it's not like out in my backyard. You see all these cute little ranches up and down the road. It is not like that where I am at. I have to drive 50 miles to get to my ranch. And so it was heartbreaking to see some of my cows stolen as well. Had it not been for my family and friends, I would have not been able to hold on to what I've had. My father-in-law, he's 77. He gets on a horse and comes with me and my 19-year-old daughter every week to help me round up on a range we don't know, because this is new range for my cows. We branded a couple weeks back, and he's there throwing my calves, if you can believe it. But friends coming in to help, because you need an extra rider. My father-in-law, every day, my truck breaks down, he gives me his truck. My trailer loses the axles that I just paid $6,000 to replace, and he gives me his trailer. My sister-in-law, who has been so gracious to allow her whole ranch for my cows to roam and beyond, to stand up and fight. I could have easily sold. I've had offers. I've had 7 different offers to buy my ranch because it's so coveted out there. There's no ranches for sale out where I live on the strip. I could be done with all of this mess. But it's the principle of the matter. They're telling me that I can't use my own property, that I cannot have access to my own water and feed for my cows. They're picking and choosing which regulations they're going to follow. We don't get to choose which regulations we get to follow. We have to follow them all. We don't get to tell the BLM officer, we don't do it that way, like they told my lawyer. They need to be held to the same standards we're being held to. We need to have the right to vote these people into office and not allow our federal agencies and governments, our ABC groups that are being created everywhere for everything. We should not allow them to do that. We should vote these agencies out. We should elect the people that we want to put in charge of whatever problem we may have. That's how it was set up in this country to begin with. Not to allow a federal agency to have the right to create and then enforce regulations upon us without us electing them. The FBI. Oh, the FBI. Who would have ever thought, in a million years, me, this is me talking to myself, who would have ever thought that the FBI would be watching me, following me wherever I go to speak. It's beyond my own comprehension, but yet it is happening. My daughters and I have been invited to speak at events around the country to talk about who LaVoy really was, not the narrative the media wants you to hear. And since then, the FBI, BLM, and Oregon agents are practicing irresponsible tactics of intimidation and libel with the assumed goal to silence my daughters and my rights to free speech. The FBI have spoken to sheriffs, chief of police. They have sent out memos to city councils where they have lifelessly labeled us as irresponsible group known as the Sovereign Citizens. And they have sought to be deputized to raid our events outside of their own jurisdictions, where my children and grandchildren were present and other people's children were present. They continue today to attend our events in hopes to continue to intimidate me, and I'm not going to be intimidated. And the more they do this, the more I'm going to speak. I honestly had no idea what a sovereign citizen meant. I didn't know what I was being called. I didn't know really if it was good or bad or what it meant. So I went onto the FBI website to look up the definition, or their definition, of what a sovereign citizen is. And this is paraphrase, because it's 4 pages long. So I just put it into a paragraph. I won't bore you with their 4 pages. The FBI considers sovereign citizens extremists involved in domestic terrorist movements. An anti-government group is closely related to the lands movement. Sovereign citizens do not represent an anarchist group, nor are they a militia, although they sometimes use or buy illegal weapons, refer to themselves as constitutionalists. Many believe that only white men have rights. They believe that the ratification of the 13th and 19th Amendment are unconstitutional, meaning women never gain suffrage, and any election in which women vote is null and void. Interesting. Sovereign citizens don't pay their taxes, use fake currency, passports, license plates, and driver's licenses. Don't recognize government authority, courts, or law enforcement. Sovereign citizens commit murder and physical assault. They threaten judges and law enforcement, and they engineer various white-collar scams. This type of behavior is associated with rural and small-town whites in the American West. According to a survey of law enforcement personnel, in 2014, sovereign citizens are now regarded as the #1 terrorist threat in America. Can you believe that? Can you believe that they put this on their website for all to read? And then when something happens, when good men stand up for the rights of every American citizen, they're labeled as a terrorist, as a sovereign citizen terrorist? And then when people look it up, this is what they read about them? We're condemned for being constitutionalists, for being patriots, for standing up for our rights to free speech, our rights to carry, our rights to assemble. This is not okay. It's not okay. We're standing up for our own property rights. Will we continue to stand up? Yes. Will I continue to share my husband's message? Yes. In the words of my husband, and I quote, "We are not a bunch of wannabe anarchists who don't believe in government. Contrary, I believe in government. I believe in the federal government. We need the federal government in its proper place. We need the federal government. How else are we going to protect our country? I believe in the proper relationship between the states and the federal government and the counties," end quote. That is what my husband said when being interviewed. That's what my husband has said on his videos. He is not anti-government. I echo my husband's words. I am pro-responsible government. I support pro-responsible government. I am a citizen following the law within the boundaries of a Republican form of government. I think we forget that part. I think we need to start educating people what that means, a Republican form of government. Everybody thinks this is a democracy. We're a republic. I call for a fresh, new era of pro-responsible government by both the governed and the governors. It is very clear how the governed are sensing this modern irresponsibility and are reacting the best way they know how. We need responsible governors to stand. So please stand in defense of our Constitution. Please help and stand with our family. LaVoy's right to due process and his right to life was taken from him. This should never happen in America. My husband supported pro-responsible government. He was not an anarchist. He was not an anti-government. He was for pro-responsible government. And I declare and pledge my allegiance and responsibility to support and maintain a pro-responsible government, the United States of America. That is what I support. I hope that this little bit helps you to see just a little bit of what our family has been going through. The Bundys, the Hammonds are all still struggling. Mrs. Hammond is a pillar of strength at 75. She's an amazing woman. More has to be done. We have to approach Trump in any way that we possibly can to see if we can get a pardon for them. And a pardon for Joe Roberts and the other people who are incarcerated for no reason. Joe Robertson is in jail for a pond on his private property. That is why he is serving jail time. And he's 77 years old. He got 18 months. And that just happened after LaVoy's murder. It is still continuing. If we allow the government to continue to have these small victories every single place in the Western United States, we're not going to have a Western United States. It's going to be sold off or given to the highest bidder, or we're going to be just great big amusement parks for the East to come visit. We ranchers, we farmers, we miners, recreationists, hunters, we have a right to choose. America was all about fleeing for religious freedoms, right? In the beginning, people wanted to worship how they pleased. I want to choose how to work. I have the right as an American citizen to choose what kind of job I want to have to support myself and my family. And my husband and I chose ranching. And we purchased that land legally. We pay our taxes on it. We make our payments on the loan. My husband died not owing a penny in grazing fees. They killed him before he didn't pay. I have a right to work how I want to work. You have a right to choose your profession, whether it's a doctor, lawyer, mechanic, machinist, a welder. We have that right in this country. Ranchers and farmers are being demonized. The environmentalists are very good at it. We need to stand up for them. We need to stand up for anyone who is choosing something right. So I continue to ask for your support in that way. And the way that I believe really we can affect change is first within ourselves, to get educated, because I knew nothing. My husband was the educated man. He had the time to sit and read all those books. He was the one that was so good at speaking about all these different issues. I'm playing catch up, but if I can do it, anybody can do it. If I can get on a horse when I never really was on a horse, and I can try to run a ranch, anybody can do it. Do what is necessary for us to continue to teach about the Constitution. So we teach ourselves, we teach our children, we get involved on a local level, like you are, making change within the elected jobs within your local community, whether it's your school board or your city council or whatever. Get involved, because that's how we're going to make change. Make sure who you elect is principled and cannot be bribed or bought off, because the root of all evil is money. Money, fame.
The love of money.
The love of money, the power. of greed. So make sure who you elect is principled and has integrity so that they can't be corrupted. That's hard to do, isn't it? Because we're all human and we're all weak at some point or time or another in our life. But
Well, they need to be reminded too who they work for.
yeah.
We don't work for them.
Well, if we're not electing them into office, then they don't work for us. They don't feel that they work for us.
Nope. Well, they can't be
BLM,
taken out.
Forest,
I mean, that's
Park,
the other
they don't work for us. They work for the Park Service. They work for BLM. We didn't elect them.
Well, that goes back to the just placement of these entities that shouldn't even exist to begin with.
Right.
I mean, they should.
And maybe we need a little bit of land management.
When you can
Or
pass
oversee.
regulations is no different than a law because they're going to make you abide by it, but they bypass Congress. They don't have to. They don't have to have it
That's
voted
right.
on. So the people that are making decisions aren't people that you even know who they are.
Well, and to make another point, the environmentalist groups have so much power and money that they are influencing these other groups that in the past could have cared less what they had to say. But now they are so powerful that they can put pressure on the BLM and who gets a permit and who doesn't, and where that permit can be and where that permit can't be.
Well, and it came from an entity that shouldn't exist. That's the problem.
And so, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
I don't know if you have any questions.